Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy, very excited for our guest today, Professor Allan Lichtman. He is back with us, and he is going to be discussing with us his hot-off-the-press prediction for the 2024 presidential election. We'll chat with the professor in just a second, but first, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments, so email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please follow or subscribe and rate and review, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So Allan J. Lichtman is a distinguished professor of history at American University and a leading geopolitical expert. He has provided expert testimony in some 110 civil rights cases. He has written 13 books, many hundreds of scholarly and popular articles, and provided worldwide media commentary. His recent books include The Case for Impeachment, The Embattled Vote in America, Repeal the Second Amendment, and 21 Cracks, Repairing American Democracy After Trump. His Keys to the White House prediction system has successfully forecasted the results of presidential elections since 1984, including Donald Trump's win in 2016. Professor, welcome back into the back room.
Thank you. Happy to be with you.
So, your 2024 presidential election prediction is out. Tell us what you and the 13 keys have concluded.
I deliberately issued my prediction before the so-called pivotal debate between Harris and Trump to make the point that the keys demonstrate it's governing, not campaigning, that counts. And of course, I still hold to it. According to my system that's been right for 40 years, the 13 keys to the White House, we are going to have a new, unprecedented president of the U.S. Kamala Harris will become the first woman president, cracking, if not shattering, the glass ceiling, and kind of foreshadowing where America is going as a mixed person of African and East Asian descent, because the United States is rapidly becoming a majority-minority country.
Mm-hmm. Now, I just want to repeat this because we did say it in the bio. You have accurately predicted every presidential election since 1984.
That's correct. My first prediction was in April 1982 of Ronald Reagan's reelection, almost 3 years ahead of time, during what was then the worst recession since the Great Depression, when 60% of Americans said he was too old to run again, and his approval ratings were historically low. And since then, the keys have been accurate for the next 10 elections, including my prediction of a Donald Trump win in 2016, which did not make me very popular in 90% plus Democratic Washington, D.C., where I teach at American University. But the keys are totally nonpartisan. They have nothing to do with my political views. I've predicted the two most conservative presidents of our time, Trump and Reagan, and predicted liberals like Obama and Harris.
Mm-hmm. How is the model trending, if it was trending per se, before President Joe Biden withdrew from the race to when you arrived at your prediction with VP Kamala Harris heading the ticket?
Well, I had made no prediction prior to early September, when Harris had been the nominee for about a month. But I was highly critical of the Democrats for a couple of reasons. First, for openly out in public, viciously trashing their sitting president. I've never seen that, and I've studied our politics since the founding. They didn't need to do that. And secondly, I thought they were heading for a disaster on the keys, that obviously they would push Biden out. That would cost them one of my keys, the incumbency key, but it also looked like they were heading for a big party brawl, which would cost them a second key, the contest key. No White House party has ever been reelected since 1900, when they lost both those keys. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying the Democrats listened to me. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But at least they finally grew a spine and a brain and united behind Harris. And that meant they only lost one key, the incumbency key. Plus, the Harris candidacy might have salvaged two other keys, the third party key, because voters no longer had to choose between two old white guys. Hate to say that, being an old white guy myself, but it's true. And she may have salvaged the social unrest key, because Biden, the target of protest, is no longer front and center. So the keys fully took into account exactly what happened within the Democratic Party. And when things stabilized, I made my prediction, I think it was around September 5th.
How does this particular prediction compare in terms of its decisiveness to prior predictions? Is this check off more keys than other presidential predictions?
It's pretty standard in terms of the number of keys. I have 4 keys against the incumbent Democrats. It takes 6 keys to count them out. I've also noted they could lose a 5th key if things really went badly, horribly in Ukraine in the next month. I think that's very unlikely. But in the worst case scenario, it was 5 keys. In the more reasonable scenario, 4, till still a 2-key cushion. So that's not the closest on the keys, but it may be the most unusual. We have on the one hand a candidate convicted of 34 felonies, never even had a major party candidate indicted for anything, much less convicted. And on the other hand, we had this dance within the Democratic Party of the sitting president stepping down right before the convention and having a big transition. But the key is not affected by any of that. The keys are the Northern Star of prediction. They stay constant. And they're based very robustly on 160 years of history, because developmentally, they go all the way back to 1860, the election of Abraham Lincoln, when we had no planes, no automobiles, no radio, no television. Women didn't vote. African Americans were enslaved. We were an agricultural economy. So the keys have survived enormous changes in our society, our economy, our demography, and our politics, much greater than anything we see in election from election. I remember in 2008, people said to me, your keys are wrong. You got to change them. We have an African American running. Never had that before. America's not ready to elect an African American. Got to change your keys. Of course, I didn't. And my prediction of an Obama win absolutely held. Now, I'm not so arrogant as to say this could never change. It's always possible. There can be events so unprecedented and so cataclysmic to change 160 years of historical patterns. But the issue is you never know in advance. You can only know that postscript.
So you sort of touched on this a second ago. What do you say to the naysayers who might be wondering if this might be the first year where Professor Lichtman is wrong?
I've endured naysayers for 40 years. It explains all the wrinkles on my face, let me tell you. But there's something much worse than being attacked, and I'm attacked all the time, and that's being ignored. When you're attacked, you've made your mark. And every 4 years, people tell me, this is the year you're going to be wrong. And of course, that's possible. I'm a human being. Of course, I can be wrong. I'm not Speaker Mike Johnson, who claims he has a pipeline to the Almighty and tells him, what to do. I'm an historian. Patterns of history can change. But I think you can have a lot of confidence in my prediction, given a 40-year track record, and compare that to the compilers of the polls, like that clerk, Nate Silver, who told you in 2016, Hillary Clinton had a 70 to 80% chance of winning. The probability depends on the time of day you check in with him. But at any rate, overwhelmingly likely Clinton would win, he told us. Then she loses, and he says, see, I told you she had a 20% plus chance of losing. Can never be right, and he can never be wrong. It's useless. I tell you who's going to win. So I can be right or wrong. You can falsify me right after Election Day.
There's that old expression, a year is a lifetime in politics. People say that a year out. They say 6 months is a lifetime in politics. At the beginning of her truncated campaign a few months ago, people thought the same thing. Wow, geez, anything can happen. So now we have 6 weeks approximately left. Not a long time. Is there anything that could possibly change during those next 6 weeks that would compel you to change your prediction? Or historically, once you make a prediction, it's pretty cast in stone?
The biggest myth in American politics is the October surprise. I've always made my predictions before then and never changed them, because they look at the big picture of governance, not the day-to-day events of the campaign. So, for example, I picked Trump to win in early August. And then, a couple of months later, you got the Access Hollywood tape, right?
Mm-hmm.
With him bragging about grabbing women by their private parts. The pundits suddenly found their hair on fire. He's finished. Never had that before. He's done. I did not change or alter my prediction. Then on the other side, there are those who say, oh, Hillary Clinton would have won, but for the Comey letter, shortly before the election, reopening the email investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And my response is, I called that election against Clinton months before that. Mm-hmm. None of these events had anything to do with my prediction. Again, though, I'm not so arrogant to claim there couldn't be something so cataclysmic, so unprecedented to change 160 years of historical patterns, but you can never know that in advance. And to change a prediction on the fly is to make errors like I would have in 2008.
One of the interesting elements or facts about your keys and your modeling process is that polls are not a part of that process, which is what a lot of people focus on. Also, fundraising is not part of your modeling equation. And this year, we're seeing a ton of money flow in, specifically for Kamala Harris. And we're really starting to see polls move in a very favorable direction for her. And given the reality that yes, we do have a convicted felon, we have a black woman, South Asian heritage as well. Are there so many moving parts that are so different right now from a historical perspective that gives you any pause? Or you seem rock solid on the methodology.
As I said, if I started fiddling with my system based on what people say is different or unprecedented or can affect the election, I would have made a host of errors, not just in 2008, but in 2016 after the incredible Access Hollywood tape came out, mm-hmm. or in 1988 when George H.W. Bush fell 18 points behind Mike Dukakis. All the pundits said, never seen this before. No one's come back from that kind of deficit. It's all over. Of course, I predicted H.W. Bush and stuck with it. Now, here's the problem with the polls. And I'm nothing against the pollsters or the pundits. They're all buddies of mine, but they're stuck in what I call the political industrial complex. Mm-hmm. It's like the military industrial complex with its grip on us. And it forces us into this phony horse race theory of election with candidates sprinting ahead or falling behind according to the day-to-day events of the campaign, and the pollsters keep score. Why are we stuck in that? It's a terrible thing to be stuck in because it gives us trivial, negative, soundbite, day-to-day driven campaigns instead of campaigns based on substance and vision. Imagine that, which is something I've been screaming about for 40 years. So like the military industrial complex, the political industrial complex has its own unshakable iron triangle. On one point are the pollsters, the handlers, the ad men, who make huge amounts of money. We don't realize how much money they make mm-hmm. from the conventional horse race version of elections. Then there's the media, and they're all my buddies. I love them, but they have to cover the election every single day. So they have to listen to the pollsters and the pundits who keep daily score. Then there are the politicians who are afraid to go up against the media, the pollsters, the ad men, and the handlers. And we've been in the grip of this terrible iron triangle for a very long time. And I've been screaming that the keys provide a way of breaking out of that. Hasn't worked. Maybe when I'm long gone, something will change, but it hasn't in the last 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Last question. I don't believe you
Sure.
make any predictions about the House or the Senate.
Correct.
Do you have thoughts on that?
Many years ago, I developed keys to the Senate, which I thought was incredible. One set of questions for 50 elections. And I got about 85 to 90% right. But what do you think everyone focused on? The few I got wrong. So I decided no point in continuing this. It'll just undermine the credibility of my presidential predictions. So I haven't been doing it. So my views on that are purely from my gut. They, have no model, no special expertise. I would refer you to the Cook Political Report, headed by my old buddy Charlie Cook, they really drill down into the races. But, my gut tells me the Democrats will take back the House, and it's an absolute toss-up in the Senate. It could well wind up 50-50 with Harris breaking the tie.
Mm-hmm. Well, what a year. Professor, thanks for coming in. Really fascinating stuff. You certainly make a lot of people happy with your prediction this year.
And a lot of people unhappy. As I said, every year I make half the country really, really mad.
Well, that means you're doing something right?
Exactly. The worst thing is to be ignored.
Right.
Take
care. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.